Thank you to the source of creation for being everything, for being this live webinar, for being all of us, every participant, those who are here in real time and those who will be with us as we're moving along through time. Thank you to everyone's ancestors. Feeling the homage being offered to the ancestors is very sweet. It's very soft. Thank you to all of us for, let's say, thank you to the eternal tradition of wisdom for acting as the bridge between the absolute and the relative, and that foundation upon which the flow of wisdom and information resides. Thank you also for the opportunity to all of us, through us, being, thank you to being for supporting our ability to work concisely and efficiently and profoundly, to go right to the core of today's today's topic and issues, bringing forth the most important, most fundamental information, and of course empowering everybody in this group with the resources to become expert in energy healing yourselves. So thank you everyone for being with me. The topic, mastering the path from symptom to full health. We generally tend to start with the symptom. And because I mentioned before that because I have so many questions right now, I might kind of intersperse them a little bit. So I'm actually going to bring up one of the questions right away because it was magnificent. Ah, yes, here it is. Because it ties right in. If we're going to start with the symptom, we're going to tie right in here. And by the way, my intention is for tonight to look more at the inward stroke of that process where you start with a symptom and then like how exactly do we find our way in to the seed or source of that process or that imbalance, and also supporting everybody with healing so that we can all navigate our way through that stroke from the symptom to the actual seed in the most efficacious way. It's really, I feel, something that we all have the capacity to do. So that's what we're going to do tonight. So her question is, rather than unpacking and dealing with healing with every single little nuance of the illness, and then she lists like a bunch of different little nuances, right? She lists them. It seems only this one nuance she lists is like cuts to the core. And she says, it seems that underlying all these little details that surround the symptom, it all leads to a sense of having lost connection with our divine nature. Oh, she nailed it right there. So yeah, it's definitely been my experience time after time that particular principle, and you know we've referred to it a lot, we've looked at that a lot in these healing sessions, in these live webinars, that sense of separation from divinity tends to underlie a lot of different phenomena that give rise to illness. So well done, well put. And this false notion that we're separate from our own divinity makes us feel less, that we need to feel less than before we can feel more than enough. So we feel less. Isn't it possible, she says, to establish a pattern where we feel more than enough, and then more than enough of that, and then even more than enough, and more than enough? And why not be on a path of expansion where instead of focusing in on the details of the imbalance, we're just focusing on this fundamental principle of establishing divinity in the self, and then establishing more divinity, and then more divinity, and more like that. So yeah, that's the idea. She says it feels good to even think about it. You betcha. It feels really good. She says, I want to feel this even more. Look, other hands are being raised. We've got raised hands in California, man. So yeah, it's a beautiful thought. It's a beautiful question. And I think it's a great launching point for today's session, because that's a good question. Like, why do we have to get sick at all? I mean, everybody, I bet if we did raised hands, there isn't a single person in this live webinar who doesn't have a very sincere intention to be on the path of their unfolding their highest potential. And everybody's dedicated and everybody wants to learn their lessons and everybody is trying to do everything the right way, right? So why the suffering? Maybe we don't need the suffering. So looking at that, the answer that comes to me at this moment is that as we're going along and becoming more and more aligned with our full potential, suffering does become less. It does. Progress is definitely made. That happens. However, as long as we're in human nervous systems that experience life in that sequential unfoldment of moments of experience, it's basically inevitable that there are going to be bits and pieces that we miss. It's just going to be that way. For most people, I'd say we wouldn't be here doing the human form thing if there weren't big-ish lessons to learn. And for those who've really dug through all of their personal lessons, there are many, many souls that are here on earth right now who are deeply dedicated to the evolution of the collective. So even if there isn't personal karma involved, there will inevitably be collective karma until there is no suffering left on earth. So that's just a thing. We just have to kind of realize that in a sense, we're always going to, at least to some degree, be dealing with imbalances to some degree or another. But certainly the amount of suffering when we're dealing with imbalances becomes less and less and less, like that. There's another thing, because she and I chit-chatted about this on the phone today, and that is that divinity is knowing itself as us. That's what's happening, essentially, is that the divine source of creation has manifested this universe and it has manifested humans, and here we are, the antennas of the divine, right? So as that manifested form of divinity, divinity is knowing itself. And it's having the experience of expansion of consciousness, which it would not otherwise have if it did not have nervous systems that experience life sequentially. So that's good. And through us, there's like this dynamic that occurs where divinity knows itself, and then it knows itself better, and then it expresses itself more perfectly, and by doing that, then it's able to know itself even better, and then more expression and more knowledge and so forth, and it builds up in layers out to the physical material level of creation. And we're part of that process. We're not just kind of like pathetic, useless part of that process. We're actually a really vital, important part of that process. So what that means is that our intentions and desires and where we focus our awareness and so forth, all this affects the life of the mother of creation. All of it influences the way in which divinity is able to move forward and to be. So what the tools that we have to work with are, number one, our awareness or attention. So when there's a suffering of any kind whatsoever, bringing awareness into that area and focusing in is actually very helpful for the intentions of cosmic evolution. The intention of cosmic evolution is satisfied when we bravely, courageously address a problem rather than running away. We come in and we take a look at it. Then this has an extremely blessed effect on the environment, on our world, and it has an effect cosmically as well. And of course, that cosmic reality is ourself, but when we engage in that way, that causes integration between individual self and cosmic self. Anytime we're acting, anytime we're doing energy healing, or we're thinking, I've got something that doesn't feel right, what am I going to do? How do I focus? Where do I put my attention? We're actually helping knit together the fabric of our universe that's divinity and all of its manifest expression. And the more intimately that knitting occurs, the more fullness is experienced at both an individual level and at a collective level. All right, that's a lot of theory. That's a lot of theory. Okay, so let's get practical for a minute. Let's get practical for a minute. Now, some of you guys have been with me for like literally years, every single webinar without fail. So you know a lot of stuff. You know a lot of the stuff that I usually say. But this week, as I said, a lot of amazingly wonderful questions came in. And one of them, which unfortunately I didn't manage to get printed out, but one of them really, really piqued my interest. And this magnificent woman in Europe, she's in Europe, so she'll be listening in with us tomorrow. And so be saving a lot of these juicy tidbits for her tomorrow. But she asked the question, like, what kinds of practical ways or technologies or tools do we have to really focus our attention in a way that will give rise to the best possible effect? So I wanted to talk just a minute. Now we will talk for a minute about advanced hand chakra work, because this is good stuff. So we all know that there are chakras in the palms of our hands and there are chakras in the tips of our fingers. And I have a video online that goes into the fundamentals of hand chakra work. However, there are some mechanics that take place when a person uses their hand chakras, which allow us to enhance the effectiveness of the hand chakra work. So what the hand chakra does is it allows you to focus your attention on the afflicted area of the physiology more efficiently. Anyway, we're used to touching the world with our hands. And so when we get the hand chakra up there to wherever the need is, if it's a headache or something in the thyroid or whatever, shoulder pain, whatever, elbow, wherever the hand goes, the flow of attention goes with it. All right. So that's the main reason for bothering to move the hands, because you could just put your attention on your elbow. You don't really need the hand to do it, but somehow it kind of helps. It just helps. And if you try putting your hand somewhere on the elbow or on the wrist or wherever you want to put the hand, you'll notice that right away, a little bit of warmth starts to come into that area. You'll notice some physical warmth. This is good. I mentioned last webinar that I had read an article about a new type of surgery. And this type of surgery, our bodies are basically made of electromagnetic material, essentially. And this type of surgery, what they do is they put little tiny like needles into the flesh, and they shoot electromagnetic energy in there, and especially if it's something like cartilage, it warms up the tissue and the tissue becomes malleable. And then it's possible to put a mold over that spot, and when the tissue cools down with the mold on it, all of a sudden the tissue reforms itself. Well, it turns out that at night this happens consistently in cycles throughout the night. For those who experience witnessing in their sleep, if you're experiencing witnessing in your sleep, you'll notice that there are several times during the night that the body really heats up. Okay, so I'm laying in bed the other night and I'm going deep into the information that I want to give you guys in this webinar. And what I'm looking at is the difference, the very fine, delicate difference between body intelligence and the intelligence that we think of as the soul or the being in the body. Like, where's the line between the intelligence of the physical fleshy form and the intelligence of self? And so I was sitting in that junction between Where do I slice with my surgeon's knife there? Where do I slice between, this is intelligence that's completely directly from the physical form itself, whereas this part over here is from more like my ego and intellect and my mind, like that. So I'm going down, I'm slicing down like that, and all of a sudden, awareness just clicks right into body intelligence, deeply into body intelligence. And I'm still doing what my agenda, haha. And, and all of a sudden, the body's like, there's something going on with the thyroid. You need to pay attention. So I'm like, okay, I get my pillows up there. It's great to do this at night when you've got pillows and you're laying down, you're comfy, right? I get my pillows up there and I'm putting my hand chakras in a very comfortable way around my thyroid. And I start to realize, first of all, if you place mentally, you place a flower of life matrix over the palms of the hand, that orderly form, and I'll include it in the note to my husband to please make sure we include the flower of life matrix in our follow-up email. Place it here. That orderly structure, multi-dimensional structure, causes the energy, the light energy coming out of the palm of the hand to be more orderly, to be magnified, and to be more purifying. Nourishing, purifying, magnifying. So that's there, and I'm kind of moving. I'm feeling, how does the energy want to move around? And it's moving a little bit. It's moving a little bit in that area. And then it settles down, because here, when we're doing the energy healing, it's good to transcend, right? So mind goes to the source of creation. Hand chakra is there, moving the energy around. All of a sudden, this area gets hot. Like hot, hot, hot. If you taken my temperature at that moment, maybe a fever of like 104. I don't know. I was like sweating. I was really hot. And I could feel the center of the heat was right here with the thyroid. And so I realized that this is my body warming up the tissues in order to restructure the tissues so that the physical form goes back into order. And it was a moment when the only choice was to be as grounded in transcendental consciousness as possible. Because divinity, that source of creation, that transcendental consciousness, that field of pure being, is the field where the precise form of the healthy thyroid is contained, right? The blueprint for the healthy thyroid is found in the field of source. So ultimately, I mean, it also has there's some cosmic locations too, but everything comes back to source. Everything comes back to source. So hand chakra, flower of life matrix, you can move the energy around a little bit. You can feel some pulsing or it's like massaging, like you're massaging the energy, right? But then it starts to really heat up. And when the heat comes, diving awareness into source and letting the heat be there, and let the source of creation be the mold. So the source of creation it provides the shape of the healthy organ. Maybe or maybe not, that experience came in relationship to another technique that had just been dawning for me, and that was how to work with situations that are dominated by anger. What to do about that? And what I realized is that the anger itself is, I feel like in my physiology, okay, that there was a relationship with working with situations that elicit an anger response, or what goes on when there's an anger response. And what I realized is, the anger has a purpose. It initiates action that is necessary to set up conditions in the relative that are safe and wholesome and evolutionary and progressive and good for everyone. So that's why the anger is there. It's not something to run away from. It's something to utilize intelligently, compassionately even, right? Like we don't blow up at people. But if the anger is there, there's this awareness that something has to change. Something, the anger is here because it's telling me something has to change. Okay, so that's fine. So, you know, you make the change and you decide, okay, what am I going to do about that situation? You get it going. But then underneath the anger, there was like resentment, and like holding a grudge, sort of. So that requires forgiveness. So it was kind of a beautiful combination of emotional evolution. This is for everyone. This is also another technique. So many techniques came this week because this one amazing woman asked this question. And so this technique was the emotions, a lot of times, if they're really intense, if the situation's really outrageous, it can give rise to very intense feelings. And rather than allowing oneself to be gripped by really intense feelings, it's more useful to witness the feeling. So what we do is, this is the point where we shift over from kind of like the awareness of my being and my soul, my ego, my intellect, my mind, right? From that awareness into body awareness. When the awareness shifts into body awareness, and we might have to do an exercise in just a minute to get everybody sensitive to that spot where that shift is. But when it went into body awareness, I could literally feel the part of my body where the resentment was sitting. It built up in layers, you know, like 6 decades. That's a long time. That's a long time. And we are very fortunate. We are all very, very fortunate at this time in history that the planetary transits are allowing us to go very deep. Right now, at this moment, Saturn and Ketu are at 100% affliction, which means they're sitting right on top of each other. And both of these two, there are no bad planets. They're all good planets. They're all teachers. These two planets are supporting the ability to like mine. It lets us mine deep, 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 deep into the field of reality and find those stresses which have previously been considered so uncomfortable or so difficult to manage that they got buried at some really deep level. So these very old, like lasting the whole lifetime type of, and for some of us, many, many lifetimes, which goes into another question, which I will answer shortly, but many lifetime stresses which have been not dealt with. And I know we've got our Jyotishis online tonight. So I think, is it something like this transit of Saturn and Ketu won't happen again for something like 58 years? It's a while. This is the kind of thing that for a lot of us will only happen once in our lifetime, that we have the opportunity for support of environmental influences that allow us to mine deeply. So that's what's happening. It's a gift. It's a gift that there's some old thing, this old resentment that started when I was like a little tiny, tiny person and I didn't even know what was going on, right? And it built up in layers and layers and layers. And then shift awareness to the body and find the spot in the body. Oh, guess what? It happened to be pretty close to the thyroid, coincidentally. So when awareness shifted over there and I could feel the resentment as energetic structure, an emotional structure that was caught in my body, then at that point, because we're looking at it from body awareness, and you know our bodies are just they're so unfettered by egoic structures. They don't, you know, our bodies are just completely forgiving and loving, and they're our faithful servants. And, you know, the body's the most magnificent thing ever. And so the body doesn't hold grudges and it doesn't have problems. It's just, as far as the body is concerned, it's just an energy frequency. So what I realized is when I looked at it that way, just as an energy frequency that was caught in a certain part of the body, that it's possible to apply forgiveness, just use forgiveness like a balm. It's produced in the heart, right? All the feelings that we use as energy tools are produced in the heart area, generally speaking, almost always. There are certain types of very refined energy healing tools that we produce in the digestion. but then we're talking about ojas and soma, like that. Anyway, but even in the heart, ojas is in the heart too. So that forgiveness moves into the area where the resentment is and essentially dissolves it. Meanwhile, awareness is sitting in silence, right? Sitting in the silence of being, and it's just watching. Got the resentment over here, you got the forgiveness over here. They're dancing together like that, and they become finer and finer and finer and finer and finer and finer, and then it just smooths out. It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. And for whatever reason, maybe it's not like this lady's question, do we have to analyze every last little, gory detail of the symptom? The answer is, it may not be necessary to analyze every little bit, as long as we are enough understanding the mechanics of what's happening that the transformation of energy occurs. By the way, another note on Saturn and Ketu, as long as we've got these minors as in M-I-N-E-R-S, going deep, deep, deep into the field of consciousness, imbalances are not the only thing that are hidden deeply. There have been so many ages of mankind when profound understanding of the nature of natural law and of human consciousness was at levels that today have been somewhat lost. So this is a rare and incredible time in the history of mankind to reach in and pull out those gems. For example, a lot of the work that we do here in Fairfield is based on Vedic knowledge. And Vedic knowledge is a very ancient tradition, and it's vast. I mean, the volumes of Vedic literature could fill a library, right? It's like a huge amount of information there. However, it's well known that a lot of it is missing. It just so happens, for example, I think there were originally something like 9 or 12 books of Vedic math, and now there's like 1 remaining in the earth. And, there's a lot of information that we still haven't completely found. We haven't completely uncovered. And so this time that we have Saturn, which is a deep, old, slow, persistent, planet, it's able to go deep, deep, deep. And Ketu, that's very kind of like a little bit impatient and wants to get to truth very quickly, and definitely is a helper for letting go of attachments and that kind of thing. So these two teachers together give us an opportunity to dive deeply into the field of consciousness and bring out gems and pearls and things that are buried deeply. So it's not just bad stuff, it's good stuff too. All right, so let's review briefly the hand chakra. The hand is placed in the area that needs the support. There's a flower of life matrix over the palm. The awareness penetrates through the palm and through the flower of life matrix into the afflicted organ. It's good to massage it a little bit, to move the energy around a little bit, because it softens things up, and it's part of the mining process. It's part of the process by which we're able to move in to the fundamental seed of that imbalance. And then when you get into the seed, what will happen is very likely is a tremendous heating process. And you may feel, especially if you do this kind of thing at night, because that's when the body heats up anyway, that the tissues will actually heat up. Do not be afraid. It can be incredibly hot, like feverishly hot, like, uh-oh, maybe I'm sick kind of hot. Do not be afraid. It is not bad. It is the warmth that tissue requires in order to literally reset itself, literally restructure itself. And the restructuring that occurs at that moment that the body's really physically hot is the form, the new expression is provided by the source of creation, by being. So in energy healing, we focus our attention, right? So even though the hands are here and we're focusing on some part of the body, the awareness then, as soon as things really heat up, takes a dive to the transcendent. Because transcendental being will give you the shape and form that you need for not only optimal health, but for perfect divine expression, perfect expression of being. Yes.
If it's in your back, can you do it from front?
Oh, thank you for that question. Yes. So the question is, if it's in the back, because this is really awkward, right? Like, how do I, right? How do you do it? So yeah, the answer is you can use your hands on the front of the body and transmit the attention through the flesh, through the tissue to the back of the body. The other thing, yeah, because it's so, and the other thing is it could take a while. Like, you know, I've been doing this for a while, right? I'm kind of like putting myself up here as an expert. It must have taken me at least 10 to 15 minutes to go through that whole cycle with my thyroid. So it was helpful to be laying in bed with pillows, right? Because then there wasn't any part of me that's like, oh, I'm tired of holding my hand here. No, it's fine. Well, the pillows are there. I could lay there for hours. I would never get tired. It's fine. So the more comfortable you can be, the better. The awareness is not distracted by discomfort, but can just focus right in on what needs to be addressed. Especially if you have a headache or something, right? Because when it's up here, it's really hard to hold your hands up for a long time. Which brings us to another question. But I want to make sure, as we're going, oh, I promised I would do a healing for everybody we would do an exercise. And you guys have to realize, this is just coming up as I'm going along. I have not thought ahead of time, like, how I'm going to lead you through this exercise. Like, this is just a byproduct of our collective intention. Because you guys are awesome. And I literally couldn't do this without you. So let's just see how it goes. We're just going to dive in, and I'll be the mouth, and we'll take it as it comes. First thing I'm doing is I'm penetrating the field of our collective with my awareness. Being is using this vehicle, penetrating through, penetrating through. Divine being. Fullness. Okay, so as you all know, when being penetrates, one of two things can come out. One is further information or the antidote, what you're looking for. This time further information comes out. So here's the further information. The body has its own unique value of intelligence. This is why even great enlightened beings sometimes had odd things happen physically. For instance, Tatwali Baba, right, who had preserved his physiology beautifully. If anybody's familiar with him, you know, he died in, I think, in his 80s or something, and he really literally looked like he was in his 20s. He just did such an amazing job maintaining that physiology. And yet, a week before he died, he said to his followers, I'll be leaving in about a week. And then a week later, a man shot him. So he knew that was happening, that was going to happen, but that karma was not the karma of the eternal soul that we know of as Tatwali Baba, because that soul said, he said to them, I'll come back soon. I'm leaving for a while, but I'll be back, right? So there was this body, this amazing body was, it had its own specific karma. It was only supposed to last a certain amount of time. So And like Jesus is another example, right? Jesus was an enlightened master. And yet, you know, he had this karma. The body had karma. The body had karma, which leads us to understand that these bodies that we occupy, these shapes and forms, they incarnate again and again of their own, in their own, they have almost like their own storyline or path. I remember years ago, someone brought me a picture from a calendar, and it was a woman, a young woman, and I swear to God, it looked like me. It was just like if somebody painted a picture of me, that would be me, right? But she was like living back in the, I don't know, late 1700s or something. And so I was like, wow, that's so strange to see that painting by that famous painter, and it looks like me, you know? But it can happen. It can happen that the body also has its karma. And the beauty is that when you, all of you who are dedicated to the spiritual path, you're taking such good care of your bodies, what happens is when the body is in your hands, when you have access to that as your most prized possession, that it upgrades. The body evolves and upgrades. It becomes a more refined instrument. It becomes a more perfect instrument of divinity. And the next time, at some point, the life ends, the body, it goes to the cremation, or it gets buried, it deteriorates, however its cycle goes, whatever happens to it at that point, then when it's completely going back to dust again, then it has the opportunity to come back again. So the bodies have their own karma, specific karma associated with them. And as I'm looking at body intelligence, I'm describing for everybody that it seems to manifest in dimensional layers. So it builds up, in other words, from like atoms, there's like atomic intelligence and then molecular intelligence. And like molecular intelligence can be really amazing, right? Ooh, note to my husband again, to be sure to include the very, very short video of molecular intelligence. It was a gem that I found. The gem was uncovered this week. Beautiful thing. It's like a minute and 30 seconds long, but well worth it. Anyway, yeah, it builds up. So there's atomic intelligence, molecular intelligence, there's subcellular intelligence, cellular intelligence, and each cell has its own like totally unique, totally full, you know, holistic intelligence. Every cell does. And the cells together, they form themselves into little communities of tissues, and eventually to organs and so forth. And each organ in our body has its own holistic, complete little presence. It has its own presence. It's a little God presence like that. And together, the layers, they build up like that until you have the whole body, which is overseen by the body elemental, which we talked more about last time. But the body elemental is continuing to, my understanding is continuing to expand and grow, and is continuing to factor in. Body elemental remains abstract, while the body itself remains concrete. And yet, from my perspective, it's not really possible to separate body intelligence from the body elemental essentially. The body elemental is the subtle intelligence of the body, of the collective of all the cells and tissues and organs. It's also, the body elemental is old though too. The body, but then again, the body is old too, right? We think, oh, my body is only so many years, and then it dies and never comes back again. That's it. It's gone, gone, gone. Nothing in creation is gone, gone, gone. Nothing. The blueprint is it's contained in the Akashic records, right? It's contained in the great archives, cosmic archives of our universe, so that it can come again at another time. another time in history. And I feel as if I'm just looking into this thing. It's very interesting how the body elemental holds the key to that ability of the body to come back again. This is not reincarnation. This is different from reincarnation. Reincarnation is the soul coming back again, right? But the soul frequently will take a very different type of body from one lifetime to the next. But the body, the same body, it reincarnates, it reforms for another soul to inhabit. It's interesting. So that means that the body can have memories, right? From its previous time when it was occupied by another soul as well, which is a whole nother area that's good to be aware of. We need to be aware of these different locations that we want to look. And actually, this is something I want to talk about tonight. And already our time is moving along and I've got all these questions, yikes. So, yeah, it's like, what do we do exactly? We need to get on to what do we do exactly. Oh, do we do the exercise? I'm asking being. When we do this exercise, we begin with awareness, the soul, which the indweller of the body, that awareness. That's who starts out, the seer, the doer. The being is the witness, and being can manifest forth as the personality, right? As the individual who is watching this webinar, who has a name and has a life and has a job and has a family and all that. Or being can come forward just as the body awareness, just in pure body awareness. So what we're going to do is, we're all used to functioning from that person level, our person level. So we're going to start with that. Start with the person level. I'm going to close the eyes, because when we close our eyes, it's easier for awareness to settle down, right? And as we settle down, the heart area settles down. The heart area holding fast to the silence of being. Heart understanding then penetrates the flesh of the body, penetrates out through the whole body. And just feeling what the body is doing, scanning the body. It's really a useful tool to learn to scan your body. Body is very wise. It holds vast amounts of cosmic information. So when we learn to scan the body, we learn to access archives, vast archives of information. Body is held in a deep, loving embrace by its own intelligence, by the body elemental. You can think of this extremely intimate relationship between the physical form and the intelligence form of the body. And as I feel that happening in my own body, I'm feeling in the collective, our collective, it's loosening up issues related to self-love, loosening it up. Those issues are born in the gap between personality intelligence and body intelligence. Because personality runs the body like a car, like a vehicle, like a machine. It runs it sometimes in like a less than loving way, right? So that's where that feeling is born. So we're going into that gap, into that space between, if we go way deep, quiet, 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 quietest state of the mind, we can feel that little interface between body intelligence and personality intelligence. As we go into that space very delicately, looking for balance, supporting with balance, I'm feeling an activation of the heart area of the physiology. And what seems to be arising out of that gap is a very intense, reverent gratitude in the relationship between the indweller and the physical form. We both need each other, completely need each other. We're absolutely locked into an extremely intimate relationship. And the beauty and the glory and the sweetness and the perfection of that relationship is being celebrated right now in the heart area. This is a great, great way to support the expansion of a healthy relationship between the indweller and the body. This is a technique for resetting behaviors so that the choices that we make on a day-to-day basis are maximally supportive for the health of the body. This sweetness of this love, I'm seeing it kind of it's setting in. You know, sometimes when there's incredibly lovely, luscious, intense emotions, they kind of come in and they're like, oh, that feels really good. And then they kind of bubble away. But in this case, what's happening is in that gap between awareness of myself as the person who drives the body and awareness of myself as the body, in that little tender spot where that intimate relationship resides, there's a matrix settling in. The matrix is, of course, a sacred geometrical form comprised of threads of consciousness that come together in this nice, like mandalas, you know, symmetrical forms. It's a love mandala. I love matrix. I love matrix. It also has integration. But then again, integration is part. Integration resides in the spaces of the matrix. The different forms of love and appreciation and protection and gratitude and so forth reside at the nodes. But integration resides in the spaces. And it's speaking to the body, not just in the present moment. It's not speaking to the self, the gap between the body and the self, but also in the entire lifetime. The entire lifetime that you have resided in this body, this matrix is stabilizing in, because it's at such a fine level, it is not constrained by space-time. What that does is it allows the loving relationship to build up in layers. It allows it to stabilize in that lovely Saturnic energy, right? We've got Saturn and K2 on top of each other right now. Saturn builds slowly, consistently, stably. It builds up these nice, solid foundations. And this is what's happening, is a deep foundation of absolute devotion between the body and the indweller, founded upon reverent gratitude and deepest adoration. Devotion. And the heart gets it. The heart totally gets it. As the heart gets this, the heart like shifts around and like integrates the experience, that shift in the heart affects the web of life. Because remember, the matrix is comprised of the threads of consciousness, right? And so is the web of life. The whole web of life is comprised of these threads of consciousness. So as the heart stabilizes, the web of life receives a kind of a wave of fullness, a wave of fulfillment, which of course blesses the ancestors. Because who is more responsible for the body than the ancestors? No one. The ancestors are the responsible party. So the ancestors also receive on the level of the heart. Now, what I'm seeing in the ancestral archive right now is that the ancestors are receiving this integration and this love matrix in the gap between their relationship, the indweller versus the body, or together with the body, let's say, working together. But I feel that the ancestors are not well able to verbalize their experience. They're not well able to verbalize. They are, however, able to directly live out the experience as parents. To whatever degree, whatever ancestors. And I'm also looking into those families that had various dysfunctions, loss of father, loss of mother, things like that, you know, so that those individuals also can receive at this time, wherever those souls are, whether in the spirit world or in the physical, doesn't matter. They also receive now. But for those who were able to kind of go through the parenting process, the parenting process changes them. It supports the evolution of the heart. And so that natural progression of evolution of the heart that occurs when people are parents is able to include this upgrade, the upgrade that's taking place right now. The softness is just so exquisite, so beautiful, so beautiful. It's like, may it never end. May it be so integrated and so completely imbibed by both the body and the indweller that it's always, you always have it. Always, 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 always. It's the foundation of every experience. It's the foundation of every understanding. It's the foundation of every analysis of everything that happens. It is the filter through which the universe flows into us. May it bless and bless and bless. Beautiful. Okay. Question. Oh, look, somebody told me I was gorgeous. Thank you. I love you. You are too. Each step, here's a question. Each step of evolution is unique, so it requires our attention to fully appreciate it and to fully mine it. Oh, and that comes from one of our Jyotishis. So this is so beautiful. And this, I definitely feel that her comment reflects to that first question that was asked about, you know, couldn't we just like sort of cut to the chase and just like maybe avoid having to look at all the details? And I think that at some point or another, as we're going along, the organization, the inner structure organizes in such a way that even when we're looking at a symptom and we're dealing with a situation, or we're trying to address some financial something or whatever is happening, the car breaks down, whatever, that within that process, there's so much evolution imbibed in the process that it's just bliss. It's just bliss. Okay, so another lady says she's going to try the hand chakra thing with allergies and skin-related allergic reactions. I would like to add to that it would be very good to put the hands over the thymus, because the thymus is the center organizer or administrator of the immune system. And when there are allergies of various types, what we're essentially looking at is the immune system responding to something as if it's an enemy when it's really not an enemy, right? Like pollen. It's like, pollen, uh-oh, here it comes, it's my enemy, I better fight it, you know, right? And it gets scared, the body gets scared, and it overreacts with too much pitta, too much histamic response, and the next thing you know, everything's swollen up, and inflammation, and sneezing, and everything. So, yeah. The immune system. I was actually looking into the immune system today, this week. That was one of the areas that I took a bit of a dive and extracted some information. It includes the lymphatic system and the spleen and the bones and the circulatory system, obviously, because the nutrients and the various, like the immune system cells are created. One of the places they're created is in the bones, because the bones of the marrow of the bones produces all kinds of amazing resources for our body, right? Like hormones and enzymes and other neuropeptides, and of course all the blood, white blood cells and red blood cells and T cells and all that comes from the bones. So, and here's a really interesting point that I didn't know before I was doing the research. When people are small people, they're little child people, the marrow of the bones produces all sorts of good, yummy stuff of all the bones. And the older you get, the more the marrow of the bones kind of turns to a fatty tissue. And by the time a person gets to be like middle-aged or a little bit older, only a few bones continue to produce new cells. But of those few bones, one of the areas that fascinated me were the ribs. Our ribs, the marrow in the ribs continues to produce new blood cells and hormones and enzymes and all that good stuff that we produce. And I find this very interesting because this is the area of the heart Mahamarma, right? And it's the intelligence in this part of the body that's the great administrator of all the different systems of the body. And we went into more detail in this in some previous webinars, but in brief, that the magnetic field produced by the heart is so powerful, 60 times more powerful than other areas of the body, that the magnetic field produced by the heart literally influences the entire magnetic field of all the other organs combined, essentially. So whatever's going on in the heart, it's telling all the rest of the body what to do. So isn't that interesting that the heart's right there, and then it's in the ribs that you're producing resources for the rest of the body? It's fascinating that heart, of course, how it beats is controlled by the feeling level, right? How you feel. So that means we all have exquisite control over the controller of the body, essentially. One of the great, brain's a great controller too, but they all have their roles. The brain doesn't create as much magnetic field though, not by far. Okay, oh yes, so we're gonna look at this process. So we start with a symptom, and this also relates to another question that came in. Oh yes, here's the question is up on top. Beautiful, from a brilliant Vedic scholar in Turkey. Ooh, what a combo, right? So his question is that we use feelings, we use access to how we feel as a means of reaching the source or the seed of a symptom. So we start with a symptom, right? There's something in the body somewhere or in the life somewhere. You know, it could be a relationship, something, or a mouse in your kitchen or whatever, right? Yeah, you have something that's not quite right is going on. And we start with the symptom, and then the next thing we do is we go to the feeling level. Now, I think I mentioned earlier, I'm pretty sure I mentioned earlier in this webinar that learning to scan your body is a good skill. Oh yes, I did mention that. Okay, this is where body scanning really comes in handy, because the symptom is on the surface, but often the seed is not exactly in the same spot where the symptom is. I'll say that again because this is important. Often the seed of the imbalance is not in the same location in the body where the symptom is. A lot of times it is, but it isn't always. And besides, the seed is almost inevitably at some deep abstract level of consciousness that isn't really isolated or located at any particular spot in the body anyway. However, body scanning is useful, and the reason is you have a symptom somewhere, then what we do is, one of the first things I always do is I take a look at what's going on in my heart Mahamarma area, my heart chakra, or Mahamarma is like the big area, and then chakra is just like the little center of it. But I check, because that will tell me what the feeling is that's associated with the symptom. Like say the symptom's a headache. We put the hands, you can put your hands over your heart if you want to find the feeling more easily, because remember that helps focus the attention, but you don't have to. If you can just get the attention into the heart area, the heart understands reality and it knows truth. The heart has direct access to truth. So the heart will provide a feeling map, an emotional map. It provides an emotional map that's behind that symptom. Now you have two things. You have the symptom, which is something more or less on the surface, and then you have a feeling map to go with it. That's like having two eyes open. Two eyes open gives you perspective. So when the feeling is there and also the symptom, the next step for me is usually to transcend. Not that the transcendental experience isn't always present, but to just check in with source. Check in with source, because once you've got those 2 points, you add source, then you've kind of got a 3-in-1 structure going on there, and that's a nice stable structure. Source, the source of creation, source of yourself, being, the cosmic source of everything in the universe, has all the information. And what it does is it communicates through the cord of light into the body. And the body usually picks up the information faster than the intellect. The body is very quick. And usually what happens is the pineal gland will start to activate, because the pineal gland responds when divine wisdom is present. When divine wisdom is penetrating or is coming in or is being received by the body, the pineal gland responds to that by producing impressions, sensations, visual impressions. You know, it produces dimethyltryptophan, which sets off the different sensory cortices, the inner points in the brain where we process sensory information. And so what it does is you start getting impressions of things like maybe an old memory or some other type of impression of something maybe that's going on in the present time, that all of a sudden you realize, oh, that thing is related. Oh, that experience that I had last week is probably related to this feeling that I'm having now. Like, you might not have put two and two together, right? But then, you know, it'll bring it up. That happens up in sort of the head area. So we kind of start in here in the heart area, but then that gives rise to a response in the head area. Also, all that body wisdom, it has its seat in the belly area. So you really get all three of the sensory, of the big energy centers moving at once on that. And when we start to get a collection of little bits and pieces of information, then the picture starts to form. It's like putting a puzzle together. It's really very fun. I actually love that inner dive of mining, right? Going in deeply and figuring out what is the whole story behind this symptom. Because once we figure out the whole story, all the details, as many details as this being needs at this time in order to eliminate the symptom or to transform the body back to health, then there's a feeling of, you get that sense of completion or satisfaction or resolution, which is so lovely. Okay, so that's kind of this process in a nutshell. The question is, what about the brain? Can we do a healing for clarity of mind? That's a lovely idea. Thank you for that question. From California. God bless California, Californians. I'm looking into the field of our collective. And what's really important for our brains is the stability and adaptability of the neural functioning. And the reason is that when the wiring gets stuck, then naturally blind spots occur. Areas where it's literally not possible for attention or awareness to move. So flexibility is really important, but flexibility is useless without a stable foundation. The stable foundation, very interesting, ties into the work we were doing earlier in this healing session, is in the corpus callosum, because the corpus callosum integrates or holds together the two halves of the brain. So integrative energy is seated in the corpus callosum. That's beautiful. I didn't know that. We've been working with integrative energy for like years, right? But who would have thought of that as a seat of integrative energy? But it is. I mean, now that I think about it, it makes perfect sense. It's logical, like no brainer. But anyway, it takes our group to bring these things out, which is why I love you guys so much. Because without our group, I wouldn't get these insights either. It's just so brilliant. We're like a team of miners. So going in and finding that good stuff. So the stability is in the corpus callosum. The more stable, and it's interesting because that corpus callosum is deep down there, right? Deep down in kind of the center of the brain and like low. It's low down in the center of the brain area, that it's like the foundation of a building, that when the corpus callosum is really well integrated, it has lots and lots of neural connections. And I'm asking, is there a way, is there an energy healing technology for increasing the number of neural connections in the corpus callosum? That would be useful. I used to teach music back in the day. I was a music teacher, and I used to do research on the effects of music on the human brain because, I mean, I didn't do the research, but I was reviewing research on the effects of music on the human brain. And it was fascinating to notice that the corpus callosum of musicians tends to be thicker and have many, many more neural connections. Oh, and here was another little fact that came up. The female brain tends to have about double the number of neural connections in the corpus callosum than the male brain. However, men who are musicians have bigger, thicker corpus callosums. So, okay, so I'm asking being, is it possible? Ooh, I'm already getting a yes. Is it possible that we can access that cosmic hum, the hum of the universe? Is it possible that the presence of the hum of the universe could facilitate increased neural connectivity in the corpus callosum? And the answer I'm getting is a big, big yes, a big fat yes. So, okay, so the next question is, how can everybody in this webinar live time, and this webinar future time, past time, future time, how can everybody access the hum of the universe? Okay, so the hum of the universe is accessed through the physical nervous system, and it is processed through the inferior temporal cortex, okay, which is like, and the superior temporal cortex. Sorry, well, both. Okay, the download's coming in. It's faster than I can say it, sorry. So, okay, so I don't know how many of you have heard of this shrutis, smritis, and puranas, but anyway, those are Vedic terms that refer to the original hum of the universe is the shrutis. And the shrutis, the original hum of the universe, shruti. So accessing shruti, enlivening shruti, how? How do we do it? How do we get to it? It's present in the beginnings of the manifestation of our universe. And the beginnings of the manifestation of the universe are accessed through the causal level of the physiology. Oh, I haven't talked much about layers tonight, but some of you guys have been with me forever. You know what the causal body is. It's the finest level of feeling of the body. It's the deepest manifest level, the most delicate, the first manifest level in the causal field of self, which is kind of like a big ocean, right? It's really close to the absolute, so it looks like the absolute, sort of. It's like a big unbounded ocean of just resonation and humming. In that field, there is a sacred center. Remember I said it's really useful to be able to scan the body? Well, it's useful to be able to scan it physically, but it's also useful to be able to scan it energetically. And so I'm recommending everybody, here's another technique. I'm recommending everybody to practice scanning the physiology from time to time. Great time to do that is when you're falling asleep at night. Because the senses, the outer senses of perception, settle down, the inner senses are able to be more hypersensitive to what's going on inside, but there is, I'm telling you, a sacred center to the causal field of self. And in that sacred center, all the Shrutis are there. You can find it. You can find the center, because the center is easy to find. No matter what kind of shape you have, see the shape of the flower there? And there's a center right there. Oh, there it is. It's easy. It's easy. It doesn't matter if it's a square or a circle or a triangle or whatever. We have a way. Our human mind has a way, activation, download in the prefrontal cortex, for finding that sacred center. For finding that center. And interestingly, the corpus callosum is also kind of sitting in the center location. It's a little bit low center, but it's in there, center location. First time you hear the hum of the universe, it could feel more like a little, very delicate, like not painful at all, but very delicate pressure in the kind of the temporal cortex. Could feel a little bit like that, a little bit like a pressure. But if you let awareness, this is how we find, right? Let awareness feel into the temporal cortices. And that's, temporal cortex is right kind of behind the ears, essentially. So let the awareness be there, because wherever we put our attention, that's what gets enlivened, right? And as it's there, you can even use your hand chakras, maybe. You will start to hear that humming. You'll start to hear, it's like a buzzing or humming sound of creation. That buzzing, humming sound of creation is a sound vibration, hum of the universe vibration, which activates the corpus callosum in the most precise and evolutionary manner, causing it to evolve more neural connections. So even if you're not a musician, all you have to do is listen to the music of the universe. Everybody likes music. We can do it. I see another question came in. Oh boy, 2 more completely awesome questions. Oh, here, during the healing, she says her whole body heated up intensely, and she felt in both of her ears and both of her feet, and her heart is melting at the same time. Woo! Go! Go, my sweet friend. She's from the Philippines, that one. Beautiful. There's another question here, but we're out of time, so I'm going to ask that we write the question down, and I will address it tomorrow. I'm sorry I'm not addressing it now, but we ran out of time already. Sorry. It goes like that. Sometimes we run out, and I've still got a whole pile of questions down here too. But we'll look more at this tomorrow, and tomorrow maybe we'll focus a little bit more on the outward stroke of the healing process and how we apply and utilize all of our healing technologies and tools